Okay guys, welcome to another video. In today's video I wanted to do kind of an update video on the Ruger American Ranch and 300 Blackout. I did a video on this probably, I don't know, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. I've had this rifle for quite a while, and you can see a couple changes, just a different scope and then spray paint job, and then a different lighter weight sling, and we might get into that. But I wanted this video to be a little bit deeper than just like, hey, look, it still fires, right? That's a pretty low bar for modern firearms. But the update is I still really like this gun. This is probably my favorite gun. I think of this, I grew up reading, Jeff Cooper, The Art of the Rifle, To Ride, Shoot Straight, and Tell the Truth. And then I think it was Guns and Ammo before his passing. He had a column in that, and growing up reading about the scout rifle and stuff like that, this is not a scout rifle, right? That group of guys, scout rifle people, are just sticklers when it comes to every single detail. This is definitely not. It's not the right caliber. It's not 308. It doesn't have backup iron sights, and it doesn't have a 19-inch barrel, but it's a 30 cal 300 Blackout. It's lightweight. As you see it with the scope, with the sling, it's 6 pounds 9 ounces, which I think is almost exactly 3 kilos, which was his kind of goal weight. It has a 16-inch barrel instead of a 19-inch. It only has a 2-point sling, not the 3-point sling. I just prefer, well, it's not adjusted proper, but I prefer just a simple 2-point. I don't like having that 3-point chain sling, as they call it. And it doesn't feed from stripper clips, or it doesn't have a blind magazine. It has detachable box mag, and it doesn't have a forward mounted scope because it just doesn't. It's set up for a traditional scope. But besides all that, of all the rifles I have, this is probably the one closest to a scout rifle. It's lightweight, compact, handy. It's 30 cal, but not 308. It has very little recoil. I can shoot it very fast. All the game around me, I can hunt with this. Because it's light recoiling, if needed, I could use it defensively. Blah, blah, blah. I might do a video coming up talking more about scout rifles. But what I want to talk about in this video is I wanted to compare, right, the 300 Blackout to 357 Magnum. Now, before you click off this video, I promise, stick around for a couple minutes. I'm going to bring up a couple interesting points. I've never heard people make this comparison before. Many people compare the 300 Blackout to the 30-30, and I used to think that as well. I used to think of this rifle as a modern day Marlin 336, a modern day 30-30. Because 30-30 is just now coming back on the market, but it's way more expensive than it used to be. 30-30 used to be really common in the past because the ammo was a lot less expensive than 30-06, 270, 308. And then 30-30 you just couldn't find anywhere for a long time, but you could find 300 Blackout. So like, and then people like to compare 30-30 to 300 Blackout, and I'll be the first one to say 300 Blackout has less muzzle energy. It has less power when you just look at the ballistics tables. However, 300 Blackout is using, modern bullets, versus 30-30. They have to have old style, like soft points, round points, so not as aerodynamic, lower ballistic coefficient, that type of thing. But the more I started thinking about it, and let me back up for a second. The reason I came to this comparison is I've been in the market I've been wanting a lever action, 16-inch lever action 357 or 44 Magnum. The reason I want one of those is, one, I just kind of want a lever action. Two, especially in the 357, like the Rossi 92 or Marlin just came out with a new model made by Ruger, the 1894. And the reason is I just think it would be cool to have one, and I probably still will get one. However, on one hand of my, one side of my brain really wanted it. It would be cool. It'd be cool to like hang on the wall, plink with, pest control, that type of thing. But on the other hand, I'm like, I don't actually need it, and I think there's better modern alternatives to a 357 lever action that I'm just not thinking of. And then the more I started thinking about it, I kept coming back and thinking about this rifle, in that if I got a lever action with 357, everything I would, at least in theory, use that rifle for, I already use this rifle for. And for a second, I'm like, well, that's not proper, because 357 is a pistol caliber and 300 Blackout is a rifle caliber. However, the first thing to keep in mind, the 300 Blackout isn't necessarily a rifle or pistol cartridge. Many people run it 300 Blackouts in sub 16-inch barrels. Now, depending on laws, it's an SBR or an AR-15 pistol with a sub 16-inch barrel. So by default, AR-15 pistol, 300 Blackout's kind of a pistol round, but also you can run it in a 16-inch barrel and get some velocity and power increase, just like you can with a 357. A 357 primarily is a pistol cartridge, but you can run it in a rifle for increased velocity. And then this is the 300 Blackout 9-inch barrel. Right, so people talk about a rifle pistol combo when it comes to a 357 lever action, and then you complement it or supplement it with a 357 revolver. I've always thought that theory was kind of cool. However, and again, I'm cheating a little bit, this technically is a rifle pistol combo. So I just have a couple notes here. Again, do your own research. This isn't the end all, be all thing, but once I started comparing 357 Magnum and 300 Blackout, I was surprised at how similar they were. So just, to start off, and these are rough numbers. If you hand load, you might have higher numbers. These are just clicking around on the internet. If you're interested in lever action 357-44 Magnum, Lucky Gunner, he has a really good comparison between 357. He has a video on it and an article. So I use some of those numbers because, I think those are pretty honest, reputable numbers. And then just clicking around, I got some other numbers as well. But just as an example, one number I came up with from his test, 357, 125 grain Remington soft point, I believe, out of a 17-inch barrel, right? You get 2,100 feet per second and 1,220 foot-pounds of energy. Well, 125 grain 300 Blackout out of a 16-inch barrel, you get 2,200 feet per second and you get 1,300 foot-pounds. So those numbers are very similar. 125 grain, 2,100, and then 1,225. 300 Blackout, you get 125 grain, you get 2,200 feet per second, and 1,300 foot-pounds of energy. And I apologize, I'm not technical enough to roll up a spreadsheet while I'm talking, but as you're watching this video, or when you're done with it, you can open a new tab, or while you watch this video, and compare the two. And verify. I'm not making numbers up. I did round some of the numbers just so it was easier to read. And then there's 110 grain. Well, I'll get to that in a second, but so really similar velocity, the same bullet weight, and roughly pretty close in energy. Now, the other thing is barrel length with a 357 and barrel length with a 300 Blackout. And in this video, I kind of wanted to talk about just rifle performance. Many people think with 300 Blackout, I've heard people say like 9-inch you get optimal powder burn, and they kind of relay on that means after 9-inch barrel length and 300 Blackout you don't gain any velocity, and that's just wrong. The numbers I came to for 110 grain this round, which is 110 grain. Well, not this exact round, but 110 grain. This is a Hornady 110 grain copper kind of hunting bullet. Out of a 9-inch barrel, you get about 2100 feet per second out of a 9-inch barrel, which gives you about 1100 foot-pounds of energy. But out of a 16-inch barrel, you get 2400 foot-pounds, or 2400 feet per second, and 1400 foot-pounds of energy. So again, not substantially more, but that is quite a bit more velocity, quite a bit more energy out of a 16-inch barrel. So if you start hearing people say 16-inch barrels don't make sense, you should get a short barrel 300 Blackout, blah blah blah, you do get performance increase out of a 16-inch barrel, just like you do with a 357 Magnum. 357 Magnum from Lucky Gunner, again, I'm talking about a 9-inch barrel, but from Lucky Gunner, he was comparing a 357 4-inch barrel and a 357 17-inch barrel. And with 125 grain out of a 4-inch barrel, he got 1400 feet per second, and which is 550 foot-pounds of energy. But out of a 17-inch barrel rifle, 125 grain 357, he got 2100 feet per second and 1225 foot-pounds of energy. That's a substantial upgrade. And then 140 grain Hornady lever evolution, he tested a 4-inch barrel, 140 grain, he got 1300 feet per second, which is 525 foot-pounds of energy. But out of the rifle, he got 1700 feet per second, which is 900 foot-pounds of energy. So going from that 4-inch barrel to a 17-inch barrel and a 357, he gained, with the Hornady lever evolution, he gained 400 feet per second in velocity. And going from a 9-inch barrel 300 Blackout to a 16-inch barrel 300 Blackout, you gain 300 feet per second of velocity. So pretty comparable, but with 357, the thing is, 357, he's comparing a 4-inch barrel. So if I would have gotten data on an 8-inch barrel, it probably would have been closer to about 300 feet per second. So you gain similar energy increase going from pistol to rifle length in a 357 as you do with a 300 Blackout. Now, I'm not going to get into ballistic coefficient. Ballistic coefficient is pretty much how aerodynamic the round is, and that might be short-sighted on my part because that's a really big point in this whole discussion. But again, there's so many numbers, so many variables. So again, I encourage you to go look at the data and compare it. Again, if I started listing all these numbers, drop, and all that stuff, what I will say is 357 is going to shed energy a lot quicker because it's not going to have as high of ballistic coefficient, which means it's going to lose energy quicker and it's going to drop quicker. So for rough numbers, maybe call it 357 Magnum carbine, maybe call it a 150 yard to 200 yard gun maximum range, maximum like effective, be able to make repeatable hits, that type of thing. And a 300 Blackout, I've always considered a 300 yard gun in a hunting context. But again, a 9-inch barrel 300 Blackout pistol, you are starting at a lower velocity, so maybe bring that back to 200. So now suddenly they're kind of within the same ballpark. But 300 Blackout I've always thought of as a 300 yard. The only reason I say that, and people have definitely taken it farther, the reason I say 300 is it still has a pretty good punch at 300 yards, and that's the farthest I shot it where I can just make repeatable hit after hit after hit. With both of them, they both are not aerodynamic rounds. They're not long range rounds. But for most people in most hunting situations, most defensive situations, you're talking about 100 yards, maybe 150. Oh, and this is a third 300 Blackout. This looks like an SBR, but it's not. This is an H&R handy rifle. They're not made anymore. 16-inch barrel, threaded barrel, 5.5 pounds with scope. This is a really lightweight, compact, handy rifle. Break action, no safety except your finger, which I appreciate. This is a loophole 2.5 power scope. This is a really cool gun. I haven't really shot it that much ever since getting my Ruger American Ranch, but this was my first 300 Blackout, and I just thought the thing looked cool. It's lightweight, compact, carry on the side of a backpack, easy, and this would be a great youth hunting rifle for their first rifle. Say they're, a 10, 11, 12-year-old. Talking about weight. So again, this with scope, 5 pounds, 10 ounces. So without scope and mount, you're looking at probably 5 pounds. Pretty lightweight, pretty short, but single shot. This is 5 pounds, 10 ounces with scope, but nothing unloaded, so no magazine. 9-inch barrel, M4 platform, pistol, 5 pounds, 5.5 pounds roughly. Very maneuverable, very lightweight, very easy to carry, very accurate, and the ability to mount a white light, the ability to mount, a sling or other accessories, lasers, that type of thing, really easy. And then this, as it's configured, 6 pounds, 9 ounces. So about 6.5 pounds, that's with the scope. You pull the scope off, the factory says this is a 6-pound gun, but when you remove the rail, because I'm using Tally direct connect rings, it brings it down to about 5 pounds, 8 ounces. And this is a Weaver 1 to 3 power scope and Tally aluminum rings and a lightweight sling. About 6.5 pounds. Very lightweight. The reason I bring weight up is a reason a lot of people choose the 357 lever action is because lever actions are compact, they're flat in profile, so they're really easy to carry, but generally they're known to be fairly lightweight. And like that Marlin 1894 that just got reintroduced recently is 6 pounds, 6.2 pounds, so 6.25 pounds, but that does have an 18-inch barrel. And then a Rossi 92, 5 to 6 pounds. If you get a base rifle, it's maybe like a little over 5 pounds. And then if you get one with a threaded barrel and like a scout scope rail, you're at about 6 pounds. So really comparable. Both of them can handle short barrels without huge detriment. Generally both are fairly lightweight, which gets to kind of one of my last points is an advantage people talk about with 300 Blackout is suppression, or silencers. You can see this has a threaded barrel. All three of my 300 Blackouts have threaded barrels that can accept a suppressor. And you can run standard velocity 300 Blackout, 110, 125 grain, 150 grain, but they specifically make a 220 grain subsonic to use with a suppressor, subsonic. And the reason, that's kind of a big reason why people go 300 Blackout. However, the 357 can also chamber 38 special, and 38 special, like 158 grain, I believe even still out of a rifle, is subsonic, because out of a revolver, 38 special, 58 grain, you're looking at, they're really slow. So out of a rifle, I believe they're still subsonic. So it is possible to get a lever action 357 with a threaded barrel run 38 specials in it and suppress it and be really quiet. You can definitely do that. So there's that. You know, people talk about 300 Blackout, the ability to suppress it, but some might even argue a suppressed 38 special is just as good. They both are going to be traveling slow, so they both aren't going to be aerodynamic. They both are going to have a lot of drop. But again, the 300 Blackout 220 grain subsonic is going to be a pointy Spitzer bullet, long, narrow, and the 38 special 158 grain subsonic is going to be a round, non-aerodynamic, right? But they both are capable of subsonic. If you get a threaded barrel lever action. If I was to get a lever action, I would probably get a threaded barrel, just to have that versatility. Now, talking about specific guns, with the 357, you're pretty much limited to Rossi 92, the new Marlin 1894, and the Henry Big Boy, which they have threaded models. The reason and there's obviously other ones, but the reason I bring that up is cost. The Rossi 92, those used to be like $400. Now that's the cheapest one, and you're looking at about $650 all the way up to $800. The new Marlin 1894 is $1,300, but it was just released. It might drop a little bit in price, but that's pretty expensive. I mean, with Bidenomics, that's actually not that expensive, with the inflation and stuff, but $1,300, it's kind of a lot of money. Now this was $450. You can pretty much buy 3 of these for the price of one of those Marlin 1894s. So if you're talking about economical shooting, you can talk about ammo price, that's important, but how much is the cost of the gun, right? This being bolt action, like I said, I have other examples. I have a M4 platform, and then I have a handy rifle or a single shot platform. Out of the 3, I'd probably choose this one. And the other thing I want to talk about, just a rough comparison between lever action and bolt actions. Bolt actions generally are going to be more accurate than lever actions. Some people say you can't shoot bolt actions as quickly as lever actions, but if your goal is to shoot fast, skip the lever action and just get a semi-automatic. However, with that being said, when I shoot this is a really fun planking gun because it doesn't beat your shoulder up, and you can run this really fast. Again, it's like a 60 or 70 degree bolt throw, super smooth, and it's a shorter chamber than like a 30-06, so you can run it really fast. So don't let people tell you that you can't run bolt actions as quickly as lever actions. The other thing that isn't brought up that much, have you ever tried to take apart a lever action? They look like intricate, old-timey clocks. There's just all these moving components. They're really complex, they're really complicated. With this, pretty much, again, I don't do this that much, but there's a little tab on the side, the bolt comes out, and you're pretty much field stripped. You can like run your cleaning rod, clean it, inspect it. If you need to, if there's a stuck case, which hasn't happened to me yet, knock on wood, it's very easy to get to. And then to further take it apart, you have, I don't know what size, maybe 3/16 hex, one here, this piece comes off, and then the whole barrel and trigger comes off the top, and you're left with a stock. So field stripping the two, the bolt action is way simpler, it's way easier. You pretty much only need one tool. If I was smart, and after this video I'll probably do it because I have a lot of extra Allen wrenches, whatever size hex key this is, I'm going to probably drill a hole, maybe in the buttstock, so I can have one of those stored, just in case I want to take it apart. I have the tool. With lever action, there's flat tip, there's sometimes hex, there's flathead, there's multiple size flathead, that you might have pins you have to drop out, or like roll pins. There's springs, levers. Lever actions are really complicated. And I used to think that a lever action would make a really good, just like general purpose carbine. But when they run good, they run good. But if you start to have problems, it's a nightmare to try and diagnose. Like I wouldn't even trust myself taking that apart in the field. You'd want to be in like a super clean workshop just in case, because there's tons of moving parts. With a bolt action, you pull the bolt out, you don't need any tools for that. And then reliability, one issue with like the Marlin lever actions is a lot of them didn't run the action smooth, and a lot of them had like extraction issues. Sometimes you'll get a good one and it runs smooth, sometimes not. And lever actions, some people might hate this comment, but lever actions are known to not have really good not extraction, but picking up the next round, trying to eject a round and pick up the next round. This bolt action in particular, I've never had like a double feed. It's never jammed up, and I run it really hard. I run it, really quick and really hard. So something to keep in mind. The other thing, synthetic stock, so waterproof, not affected by weather. The reason I bring it up is we have like an ice storm outside, just super nasty outside. With a lever action, wood, which yes, you can swap out. With a bolt action, you have a free floating barrel. With a lever action, you don't. And then the last time about ammo, because I didn't know I had this much stuff to talk about. I didn't write notes or anything, but I find it kind of interesting. If the last thing is ammo. Back in the day, 38 Special used to be really cheap. Back in the day, 357 used to be really available and still relatively cheap. The last time I was at Bass Pro, they had 9mm, 40, 45. Believe it or not, they even had 10mm. They may have had some 38 Special. I think maybe they might have had one, I don't remember now, maybe one load of 357, but maybe not. 38 Special 357 used to be super prolific everywhere. That's not always the case now, because it's been superseded by more modern pistol rounds. However, 300 Blackout, at least my neck of the woods, is probably like, 5.56. I live in a really like big gun culture, I guess, area of the country. Hog hunting, deer hunting. You go outside pretty much every weekend, you hear all my like long distant neighbors shooting off, their M4s and everything. The 300 Blackout is probably second in popularity behind the 5.56, maybe followed by 308, maybe followed by 6.5 Creedmoor. And those I consider like the top four: 5.56, 300 Blackout, 308, 6.5 Creedmoor. At Bass Pro, I don't remember how many different variety of 300 Blackout, but they had a lot. They had some of the subsonic like Hornady, and then they had some cheap Full Metal Jacket 300 Blackout. They had some hunting like ballistic tip. I think it was like Barnes. They might have had Hornady. And I've gone to other shops that sell ammo, like kind of like some farm supply stores that sell ammo. And guess what they don't sell? 357. They do sell, they had, I think, one type of 38 Special, but 300 Blackout, they had a couple different varieties. So that should tell you something. Back a couple of years ago, 300 Blackout was a niche cartridge, but today it's not. Last is performance. Again, caveat this with, I've never hunted with a 357 Magnum. However, the round isn't that aerodynamic. So I think I have the number. I don't think this is me poo-pooing on the 357 Magnum, because technically I'm more in favor of the 357 Magnum because I want to purchase the 357 Magnum. From a cool factor, it would be cool to have. From a logistics standpoint and from a performance standpoint, it doesn't make sense. But the 357 Magnum, at 150 yards, the 125 grain outer rifle has 1,400 feet per second, which translates to 550 foot-pounds of energy. That same 125 grain 357 out of a 4-inch barrel at the muzzle had 1,400 and 550. So pretty much the 357 in a rifle roughly, generally speaking, at about 150 yards, you have the same muzzle energy. You have the same amount of energy at 150 yards as you do with a 4-inch 357 at the muzzle. So from a hunting perspective, I'm sure it's doable for like hog and deer, coyote, that type of thing. But the 300 Blackout is just more aerodynamic. I don't have long distant, again, that's really easy to find. I don't have a long range ballistics 300 Blackout, but it's just more aerodynamic. It's going to drop less, so it's going to shed energy at a slower rate. Again, I've always considered the 300 Blackout to be a 300 yard deer rifle, but again, that would be the max limit. Some people may say 200. Again, some people are comparing a 300 Blackout pistol. Sometimes people are comparing a 300 Blackout rifle. But again, it's, 357, except the lever evolution round, pretty much they're all have to be round nose, so they don't set up a primer and a lever action. They're not Spitzer type bullets. They're not pointy bullets. 300 Blackout is. 300 Blackout's a newer cartridge, so it's going to have more bullet technology, and more aerodynamic. And when it comes to ammo prices, again, it can vary, ammo availability and ammo prices. If you're someone who just buys their ammo online, they both are really easy to find. Sometimes one's more expensive, sometimes the other. Again, 38 Special 357 used to be really inexpensive. Now, not as much. But you can get Full Metal Jacket 300 Blackout plinking ammo, as some people call it. It's just a Full Metal Jacket 150 grain for about 40 cents a round. And again, subject to change. But I have a lot of that ammo. And then this is kind of the other higher end. This is called a Hornady 300 Blackout 110 grain. It looks backwards in the camera, but 110 grain copper bullet, which is supposed to be really effective on deer, devastating on deer. So that's why I purchased it, because I wanted a high performance ammo, but I didn't want 5 or 10 different types of ammo. I just wanted a plinking round, which is like 147 or 150 grain Full Metal Jacket, and then I just wanted to standardize on one and stack it deep. So I got about 200 rounds of this Hornady 110 grain copper, for defensive, for hunting, for pest control. And I think that's about it. There's one area I'm missing. We already talked about the drastic price difference between 357 and 300 Blackout. The last thing, which, if there's anyone watching this video at this point, rock on, like, that's awesome. But the last thing I wanted to talk about is the weight of the ammo, which may be important from a preparedness perspective. And roughly, again, it's going to vary a little bit based on bullet weight, but roughly 357, 30 rounds of 357 makes up a pound. So a pound of 357, you would get about 30 rounds of ammo, which means 100 rounds of 357 is going to weigh 3.25 pounds. For 300 Blackout, the 110 grain round Hornady, I didn't find the number, so I put it on a scale, and I got 32 rounds per pound. I had a little scale, and I kept adding rounds till I hit 1 pound, and it was 32 or 32 and a half, because I put 33 rounds on there, and it was just slightly over a pound. So that means 100 rounds is pretty much 3 pounds. So in bullet weight, or the amount of rounds per pound, they're very similar. They have pretty similar starting velocity and starting energy. Again, both out rifle barrels, and they both have similar applications. Again, suppression, plinking, pest control, hunting. They both are light recoiling, which would be another big application for either of these. For a young hunter, for a smaller framed hunter, for an elderly hunter, both 357 rifles. And because I've shot a 357 rifle, I just haven't owned one yet, but I do want to buy one. But all of my 300 Blackouts, especially the Ruger American Ranch, you can just, and again, I'm a larger frame individual, but it doesn't have recoil. Again, if I was 80-pound 10-year-old kid, I might think it has a little bit of recoil. But they both are really similar. And like I said, I've seen people compare 300 Blackout to 3030. I don't really think that's fair because 3030 just has more power. But I've never really seen 300 Blackout compared to 357 Magnum out of a rifle. But once you start comparing the numbers, they have really similar numbers. They both have light recoil. They both are lightweight guns. They both are great for multiple applications like we talked about. So again, hopefully you liked this discussion. We can continue it in the comments down below. Do you like 357 lever actions? There's a lot of 357 fanboys out there. And I mean that as a compliment. 357 I think is an amazing round. And then there's 300 Blackout fanboys, and I think 300 Blackout is a really good round. So if you have any commentary on one or the other, which one you prefer more and why, I'd love to hear it. I think at the end of the day they both do roughly the same thing. I happen to standardize on the 300 Blackout, but I'm open to getting into the 357 Magnum world. And again, go back to my future videos, or go back to my homepage, watch some of my current videos. If you like what you see, feel free to subscribe.